are just a few minutes past our starting point, so I'm going to open us.
Yeah,
As
let's
I
everyone
said,
else mute your mic, please.
Okay.
mute and we'll bring you in as we need to. So as I said, I'm Nancy Gagne. I'm the Executive Director of the Community Coalition on Race. And welcome. I'm so thrilled that all of you are here at our first virtual coffee house discussion. We were talking earlier, many of you are now very familiar with virtual meetings. And for those of you who aren't, I hope you enjoy the experience. Some of you may be very weary of the virtual experience. It can be tiring, but this is a great way for us to get together, especially with a program like Coffee House Discussions. It's the program we use to address emerging issues in South Orange and Maplewood with community members. And access to resources during the pandemic crisis certainly fits that bill. You may have seen over the last few weeks that the Community Coalition on Race has been working to support Soma residents with guides to help them access resources. And you'll hear more about progress in the areas of education delivery, housing insecurity, food insecurity from tonight from our presenters. And I thank them. I thank Dean Daffis, Kate Cahill, and Dr. Ronald Taylor for taking the time out tonight, for being with us to address those issues and then to hear our concerns. And I thank you for taking the time out, especially at this difficult time, to consider these issues. I know that you're here often on behalf of other individuals that we're all concerned about during this time. And with that, I would like to introduce our wonderful program director, Audrey Rowe, who has worked so hard to put this together. Audrey.
Thank you so much, Nancy. As Nancy said, tonight is our first virtual coffee house discussion. And as with any first, it's both exciting but also challenging. So we're asking you right up front to be very forgiving as we will be of you as we go together through this experience tonight. Our coffee house tradition is one of candid, casual conversation in small groups with a solution focus. And we hope to recreate that in our virtual environment tonight. Tonight, our objective is threefold. We want to learn together, we want to share our opinions with each other, and we want to do some problem solving as a community as well as individuals. Topics of access inequities, especially as it relates to race, is nothing new. But that inequity is heightened during this time of COVID-19. And so it gives us an opportunity, while everyone's paying attention, quite frankly, to look more closely at inequities and to come together and talk about how we might want to address that as a community. We're grateful for our informed speakers, but the focus is really on us as community and how we choose to address the issues. Our agenda tonight will cover several items, as you see on your screen. We're going to be covering, after I finish, basics of Zoom, so we all have a little bit of facility of moving around the screen. Then we'll go into our presentations. We will do one presentation, then we'll give you an opportunity to chat, and you'll learn more about what that is when Tegan educates us all in a few minutes. Your questions to that speaker. Then we'll go to the next speaker until we've completed all three speakers. At the end of our presentations, we'll get instructions about breakouts. And breakouts will just be a virtual way to have small groups to discuss what we've heard, our thoughts, our ideas, and to come up with some solutions. We all know that being in a large group, right now we have 41 people, can be a little bit daunting for some people. So by being in small groups, it's encouraging for us to get to know each other as well as express and hear each other's opinions. Then after the breakout groups, we'll come back together again as a large group and we'll have readouts where the highlights from what you've discussed will be shared with the entire group. And then following readouts, the questions that you've been typing in via your chat function will be offered to the respective presenters for them to answer as many as they can in the time that we have remaining. Our board chair, sorry, Kelly Quirk will then close us out. And then before you leave us this evening, we hope you'll give us some feedback via our poll. So that's the lineup for tonight. I'd like to mention that my partner co-hosting this event is our own trustee, Tegan Culler. I call her the wizard behind the curtain, because all that you're seeing and experiencing technically tonight is a result of Tegan, and we really appreciate that. And now Tegan's going to cover with you some of the actual Zoom basics.
Thank you so much, Audrey, and thanks, Nancy, for kicking us off. It's so wonderful to see everybody here and have you all here. Audrey calls me the wizard behind the curtain. That means you also get to blame me if things go wrong, so I apologize in advance. This is a maiden voyage for all of us. As Nancy mentioned, many of you are doing a lot of work via Zoom these days. I know I am. I was just saying I feel like I've been glued to this chair for the last 2 weeks. But just as a refresher, I want to give you a couple of basics. So what you see on your screen is an approximation of what you might be seeing now. Your interface is going to be slightly different if you're joining us from an iPad. Some of these features will appear across the top. In general, though, you'll see there is a microphone. If you're joining from a computer, it is going to be along the lower left. It will be green when you are speaking. If it has a red line through it, that means that you are muted. We're going to ask that you mute when you are not speaking, just to avoid background noise and feedback, but don't forget to unmute, and your moderators in the small groups will remind you of that as well. Directly to the right of that, you'll see an icon for a video camera. That shows whether or not you are on screen. Again, if you have a red line through that, you are not visible at this time. It is up to you whether you choose to be visible during our presentations. We think in the spirit of a community event, it's really nice to see everybody's responses. And we definitely would ask that you turn your video camera on if you possibly can during the breakout rooms, because it's very nice for people to be able to see who they're speaking with. Audrey mentioned the chat function, and you'll see that that appears in the center of your screen if you're joining via PC. If you are joining us from a phone, this is going to come under the More section, and you can use this to type in questions that you have. Now, anything that you do when you type it in, you'll see a box that opens up, and it says that it will go to everyone. So be aware that anything you type can be viewed by everyone who's in the meeting with us tonight. If you are having technical problems, your best bet is to hover over the picture of me on your screen and go to the upper right-hand corner of that, and you'll find something there that says chat, and I can help you directly if you're having technical issues with your sound or with anything else. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Audrey to get us started with our speakers.
Thank you very much, Tegan. Let's go into our very first speaker for this evening, which is Dean Daffis. Dean earned a law degree from University of Virginia and has applied his legal skills in a number of positions involving public policy, nonprofit management, lobbying, attorney consulting, and litigation. Currently, he serves as a councilman and deputy mayor for Maplewood Township. His township committee responsibilities include public policy, legislation, advocacy, project management, and community affairs. Recently, he accepted a position with the Division of Housing and Community Resources for the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs. Dean's work focuses on statewide anti-eviction right to counsel and homelessness diversion programs for low-income households. He also focuses on homelessness prevention efforts and anti-displacement protections and policy. He'll be sharing some of his work with us tonight. Dean?
Thank you for that introduction, Audrey. I'm delighted to join all of you this evening. I want to applaud you and salute you, Coalition, on your very, very first ever Coffee House discussion by Zoom. And I want to thank everybody out there who's joining us this evening. There's a lot of things you could be doing with your time, but it's wonderful to have you with us. I hope you find this informative. And we hope it to be interactive. We don't want to just talk at you, but we want to have a dialogue with you and share, as Audrey said, our resources and hear from you about your questions and your needs. So the Department of Community Affairs is the largest provider of housing assistance in the state. Most people are familiar with the Section 8 housing vouchers, which a couple of years ago were expanded to include Section 8 home ownership choice vouchers to promote home ownership in our communities. And of course, the state rental assistance programs using state funds, because Section 8 funding is federal funding typically, to help people out of homelessness. There are many, many different programs in the housing assistance arena. The Department of Community Affairs also focuses on housing production in terms of affordable housing, and in other neighborhood revitalization efforts. As Audrey mentioned, my focus is in the housing assistance arena, and during the pandemic, we wanted to quickly and very nimbly focus on the needs that people were experiencing on the ground during this crisis. So we created an opportunity for people to reach out to us in an interactive fashion. And that is the portal that you see there, the interactive portal on this first slide. One pertains to renters and the other pertains to homeowners with a mortgage. So the idea here is that we want to hear from people individually so that we can assist them and direct them to necessary resources, either at our agency or other agencies that we collaborate with. As you probably would understand and appreciate, we collaborate with the Department of Human Services, which is also known as welfare, the Department of Family Development. There is a lot of cross-agency collaboration and coordination, especially right now. So what we have been finding during this crisis, as Audrey has already stated so well, is that the pandemic has opened up and exposed the existing housing inequities and exacerbated them. We're seeing that people of all kinds everywhere across the state are generally not familiar about their rights as a renter or their rights as a homeowner. And so we wanted to help people with that. So based on information that we received and the things that we were hearing on the ground, we compiled frequently asked questions about all the different executive orders that the governor has put into place during the crisis to help people understand their rights and their responsibilities, by the way, during the pandemic. And I'm gonna just generally, this is a very general overview of some of those rights. We can go to the second slide. That would be great. The second slide basically says tenants and homeowners submit your questions, receive general guidance, and it allows us to compile data on the back end. Let's go to the third slide. So, as a lot of you are aware, the governor issued early on during the pandemic, as soon as he issued a state of emergency, he placed an eviction moratorium and a foreclosure moratorium in place. A moratorium is a fancy word for suspension. That means that evictions and foreclosures are suspended throughout the state during the state of emergency and for 2 months after the state of emergency is lifted. And this is important for people to understand because we still get questions from tenants facing invulnerable situations with landlords who are also experiencing hardship on their end, who are pressuring tenants to leave their apartments and or possibly locking them out. I spend every day nearly walking people through their rights and making it very clear to them that even before the pandemic, under New Jersey law, no one may be evicted without a court proceeding. Your landlord must take you to court to evict you. Lockouts, changing your locks, turning out your lights, trying to get back into your apartment and being locked out of it, that has always been illegal and remains illegal. That is not a legal eviction. If people are locked out, we're guiding them and encouraging them, especially right now, to call the local authorities who have been trained in these rights, who have been trained in all of these executive orders by the governor and amended orders as well, administrative orders rather, to come to assistance and to help tenants get back in. So there is an eviction suspension and a foreclosure suspension. The foreclosure applies in the similar way. You can only be foreclosed on your house through a proceeding, through the Office of Foreclosure, a court proceeding, and those proceedings are not happening right now either because we're still experiencing a pandemic. We're still in a lockdown. People are not supposed to be leaving their homes or being out on the street during the pandemic. We also want to educate folks and provide them necessary resources during the eviction suspension and foreclosure suspension. There are mortgage relief opportunities out there for both homeowners who have a private lender, not a lender through a government-backed program like Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, excuse me, been talking all day. And for private lenders as well. The governor has secured promises from over 150 financial institutions, banks, credit unions, et cetera, for mortgage relief for at least 90 days, which includes no late fees or any penalties during the suspension of those mortgage payments, and which includes no negative credit rating if you receive that mortgage relief. For people who are on a federally backed mortgage, you may receive under the Federal CARES Act an even additional mortgage relief for another 90 days, for a total of 180 days, an additional mortgage relief. So we want to educate people about the resources that are out there to help them right now and to make sure that they take advantage of them. But what we're seeing is that for a lot of homeowners and tenants, they don't know how to negotiate this type of relief on their own behalf. They are uncomfortable doing so, or English is not their first language, or they have not a good relationship with their landlord, or the homeowner, think about your typical homeowner, a small home with maybe a rental unit in it. They don't understand the complex mortgage and foreclosure proceedings and all of that financial documentation. So again, what we do is we steer people to other agencies that can help them do that. One of those agencies that people should be aware of is the New Jersey HMFA, the Housing Mortgage and Finance Agency, which provides free housing counseling to tenants and to homeowners during the pandemic to help them negotiate and even negotiate on their own behalf relief during this time. So if you are a homeowner and you need mortgage relief today and you're not quite sure how to do this, reach out to the NJ HMFA online or call 1-800-NJ-HOUSE. That's 1-800-NJ-HOUSE to receive access, free access, by the way, to a housing counselor who can help you, walk you through mortgage relief. The big mistake that a lot of homeowners make is that they think that they need legal help. And there are a lot of unscrupulous lawyers out there, and I could say this because I'm a lawyer myself, reaching out to vulnerable people who are experiencing hardship and charging crazy fees. Please reach out to a housing counselor first. It's very likely that you will not need legal representation. And if you do, if your circumstances or stuff are such that require that, the housing counselor will direct you to legal services. And we do that too. When we're counseling tenants, we connect them to legal services organizations that are providing free legal services during this time to most folks if they really need legal services. The big question that we get is, well, there's an eviction suspension. What about my rent? Do I still have to pay my rent? Unfortunately, rent is still due. We advocates have been fighting for a rent freeze, and there's a lot of legislation, even on the state, at the state level, pending legislation about rent freezes right now. But unfortunately, there isn't a rent freeze. So your rent is still due. This is, again, why it's critical that tenants negotiate some sort of arrangement with their landlord. The governor is very aware how difficult this is and how many people we're talking about who can't pay their rent right now. And so many other people, in addition to those people who recently became unemployed during the pandemic. So he ordered recently in one of his executive orders that people direct their landlords, tenants direct their landlords to use their security deposits to make up for any rent shortfalls or arrears during this time. We are hearing from a lot of tenants that landlords are fighting back. We just want to make it clear that this is the law right now. It is not a suggestion. It's not a maybe. If you have a security deposit to draw from, that is your money, and you are entitled right now to demand that your landlord access that security deposit to make up for your rent arrears. All you have to do is make that request in writing, either by email, text, or if you want to write a formal letter, you can do so. And we direct people who have tried to do this and their landlords still refuse to the COVID19.nj.gov state website that shows them how they can report their landlord to the governor's front office team for enforcement. And believe it or not, we have large management agencies in the state who are being reported. And the governor's team is taking action against them. So it's really, really important that you're aware of your rights. What about court? Do you have to go to court? What if you are a tenant who already had an action for eviction filed against them before the suspension, before the pandemic, and you had a court date, right? What if you're a tenant during the pandemic against whom your landlord filed an eviction action? What do you do? Well, the short answer is that the courts, the landlord-tenant courts, have suspended hearing landlord-tenant cases right now. But that doesn't prevent your landlord from filing an eviction notice against you and getting a court date for that action down the road when the courts will reopen, which is why it's important, again, to do two things: to try and make an arrangement with your landlord, and if you're unsuccessful in doing so, to immediately get in contact with legal services. Again, if you go to the portal at DCA that we showed you on this first slide, yours truly, I will reach out to you and guide you accordingly. I am managing all the submissions that we are receiving from everyone across the state at this time. And believe you me, they are many. We also want people to know that utility shutoffs are not happening right now. The public utilities have also reached an agreement with the governor that during the state of emergency, they will not shut off utilities, even in those homes where there are, where people are behind and there's an arrears. So please know that if your landlord shuts off your water or your lights, if he or she takes that action against you, that constitutes an illegal lockout. And again, contact your local police right away and get in touch with legal services, please reach out to us and we will do that for you. We will connect you and guide you on how to do that. Also, hotel and motel residents. We have a lot of people across the state who are residing in a hotel or motel. And we fought very, very, very hard to protect those folks during all of these executive orders that were coming out. Because initially, when people think of tenants, they do not think about hotel and motel residents. And technically, under existing New Jersey law, unless you've been living at a hotel and motel for a really long period of time, you don't qualify as a tenant. So we now can say and direct people that if you are living at a hotel or motel and have no other housing option and would otherwise become homeless if you were not living there, even with your inability to pay, you may not be removed from the hotel or motel. I gotta stress that because I've been dealing with a lot of hotels and motels across the state where we had to get the police involved to allow people back in who were being ejected, who were being removed from the hotel and motel. Everyone is protected right now during the state of emergency, including hotel and motel residents. What else can I tell you? There's a state eviction suspension and there's a national eviction suspension. I alluded to it earlier. Under the CARES Act, it applies to public housing. Obviously, if you're a tenant in public housing and pursuant to any of the rental assistance programs in Section 8, you enjoy additional protection until July 25th. And possibly beyond that, and that your landlord cannot do anything against you right now. They can't even file late fees against you for rent that's due or attorney's fees, which landlords can do for other tenants who are not subsidized tenants or tenants who are not living in subsidized housing.
Hey, Dean?
Yes.
How far are we to coming to your final comments? We appreciate all this great information.
Yes, I'm about to wrap it up.
Thank you so much.
So yes, I'm sorry I got a little bit in the weeds there. There's so much information to cover. The bottom line is, let's go back to the first slide because I really want people to jot down the two portals. Yes, I saw all the messages. Wrap it up, Dean. You're talking too fast. I'm just seeing them. Okay. So you know what? Make a note of the portal, contact us, and we will guide you. There's no shame in asking for help right now. There is help available. It's very complicated, but please don't isolate yourself because it's going to get worse later when the courts resume and we're experiencing an avalanche of evictions and possibly displaced persons, which means many, many, many more homeless people in the state. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dean. And in these trying times where people who might not normally need this information suddenly find themselves on the precipice, it's very helpful. And it's information that if we cannot personally use, we can possibly pass on to other people. On your screen, you're seeing a reminder that now would be a great time, if you have a specific question for Dean, for you to type that into your chat function, and then we will include that question along with others that get answered at the end of our time together.
And Audrey, if I may jump in, I did want to note that we did receive 3 or 4 questions for Dean during his presentation. We do see them and we'll be passing them on to Dean during the breakout discussion so that he can answer them afterwards. We'll also try and get anything that we don't have time for wrapped up in the aftermath as we follow up.
Excellent, excellent. So we're going to move now on to our other speaker. We've talked about housing insecurity. Now we're going to talk about food insecurity. And Kate Cahill, since retiring from New York City-based financial services career in 2010, has used her business development, communications, and organizational skills to engage, advise, and support nonprofit organizations. She's focused a majority of her time on hunger relief initiatives at the state and local levels. Locally, Kate serves as trustee and treasurer for Men, which is an interfaith coalition of food pantries serving Essex County. She also manages the food pantry at Our Lady of Sorrows, located in South Orange, which is in the Men network and serves over 5,000 families annually, including Soma and the surrounding areas. She's here tonight to share with us how this already overburdened service is being impacted by COVID-19, who generally speaking is using this resource, and how our community can help meet the need in these crucial times. Kate?
Well, thank you, Audrey. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Great. All right, well, I just want to say thank you very much, Audrey and Nancy and everybody on the CCR team for including me tonight. This is really exciting for us. We don't have an advertising budget, so for us to be able to get the word out in this way is so important and really special. So with that, I just also want to say thank you to Dean for the housing comments. You know, we serve people of all types, but many of our patrons struggle with housing issues. So what Dean addressed was so important. You might have even caught me taking a picture of his first page there with the links. So that is, it's a really good resource, and that's something I think we'll all draw on more. But just to get started and give you a little bit of background on the food pantry, we've actually been around for a long time, about 40 years, but most of that time we've been, I guess, pretty quiet. Hunger was not really in the forefront until the Great Recession around 2008, 2009, when demand really kicked in. So for many years, the food pantry was really a small operation serving maybe a dozen families, pretty much just in South Orange and Maplewood. It was a quiet little operation. They probably had too much food and not enough patrons. And I would occasionally help out back then. And then my job got really busy and I sort of forgot about them. And when I decided to retire in 2010, I thought, oh, I wonder what's going on at the food pantry. Maybe I'll stop by and bring a bag of food. And I stopped by one day when they were serving, and there was a line out the door, and it was pretty chaotic. And there was really not enough food and not enough resources. And I sort of got pulled in. But what was incredible about that is I was about 1 mile from where I live, and everything I was reading about the recession and the impact it was having on people and needs was right there. And I had no idea until I walked into that pantry. So that was sort of the start of a real big awakening for me. And then, so what we did is we got a few more resources and got more food at the pantry and more volunteers, and so kind of got more of a system in place. But the need has really never subsided. It's really only grown. And I guess we've averaged out in our public distributions to about 150 or so families we've averaged up until the pandemic, when things have really taken off. And about 2 weeks ago, we served 275 people, and we're gearing up for at least that many, if not more, when we open again on Saturday. We also have started serving people in between our Saturday distributions, and we are getting a lot of calls, and I'll talk more about that. But just to give you a sense, the food pantry is an entirely volunteer-led organization, and lots of volunteers. We probably have 250 volunteers in our database. We serve Soma, of course, but we also serve our surrounding communities. So we may serve a large community right across the border in Irvington. We may serve Orange and East Orange. Some people come from Newark. You know, even a few people from Cedar Grove and Bloomfield, probably because they started with us and they stay with us. We have I think we're proud of the fact that we have a pretty good relationship with our patrons. A lot of them are regulars, but we're getting more and more new people now with the pandemic and with the fact that people are newly laid off. We distribute food formally every second and fourth Saturday of the month. And what happens is because of the pandemic, we are now distributing food outside. We used to distribute inside. We used to have a chance to really chat with people and get a sense of their stories and their needs and what was going on. But that is more challenging now when we really can't have the contact that we'd like to have. But regardless, we continue to provide food, and a lot of it is non-perishable, as you can imagine. So we provide grocery staples, milk, bread, and personal hygiene items from time to time. The grocery staples are pretty much the same ones each time, so people know what to expect, and then they can take their resources and spend them elsewhere. But they always know they can count on about a dozen items from us that are the same each time. Milk is a big thing that we spend our money on buying milk. We get monetary donations as well as food donations. And oftentimes actually all the time, we offer fresh milk, and people really appreciate that. Fresh bread from Whole Foods and Panera, Sonny's Bagels is a great supporter, Goldberg's in Milburn. All of these organizations, all these businesses provide fresh bread to us. So that's nice. And we also get fresh produce during the growing season. So a lot of you might be familiar with Rent Party, and they have a garden at the Elks Lodge right across the street from us. So, during the growing season, we get harvests of what they grow there, and that is great. There's also some CSAs in the area that give us fresh produce, and we spend some of our money also purchasing fresh produce. We get also a lot of support from Mend, especially in the fresh fruit area. Our patrons love fresh produce, so we try to give them as much of that as we possibly can. So who do we serve? Like I said, lots of folks from the area, but from some of the other towns around Soma as well. The breakdown, as you can see there, adults almost half, but children about a third. And the way that we calculate this is basically, we know how many people are in each household. So if a package of food goes to a household, we know if there are 2 children or there are 5 children. We do have a number of seniors, and once you have a senior as a patron, you pretty much have them forever until they can't come any longer. So we have a number of seniors who need some extra help sometimes and some different kinds of foods, and we try to tailor that when we can. We have a really large group of Creole speakers in the area, so we try to translate a lot of our materials. We have people who have been with us for 10 years, and we have people who are new to the country. About 40% of the people that we serve are employed in some way, 40, maybe even 50%. So I would say that if you had to characterize who do we serve, oftentimes it's the working poor. We do have a few homeless people from time to time, but not many. We have a lot of people who simply, they do have housing, they just can't pay all of their bills at the same time. And this is one way to give them some relief. We do have a lot of caregivers, grandparents who are taking care of children. Perhaps their own children are ill or can't care for their children. So that is a big piece. And previously incarcerated people who are oftentimes looking for employment. So just move on to the next slide. So COVID really threw us for a loop. We got a great demand in the amount of food that was needed. Our Saturday distributions went from an average of 125 to 150 up to 275. So that meant we really had to work hard to source food, much more food than we typically would have to source. And what happened was that just like you do, all of us, shopping at the supermarket became a lot more difficult. Well, a lot of our bulk food purchases were at the same grocery stores that you go to. So Stop and Shop, ShopRite, and all those sorts of shops, they all canceled our bulk orders. So we got pretty nervous about how are we going to have enough food on hand to satisfy the need. I have to say that the Soma community is unbelievably generous. So many people came to our support in terms of food and monetary donations. Local organizations, individuals, the response has been incredible. I've put a few messages out on Facebook. You might have seen them, but the response to those messages has just been wonderful. We had to adjust how we were working. So, like many organizations, the church that we're housed in had to close to the public. And that's where we would have our distributions. So we had to move outside. So now we do these grab and go curbside distributions, where what happens is people drive up, if they have a car, they drive up to the curb, and we simply say, "Good morning, would you open your trunk and stay inside your car?" And they do, and we put their packages inside. And we don't really even have a chance to register them. So whoever shows up gets food. And we have traffic cops, and we have lots of volunteers on hand, socially distancing, of course, to make sure that the line moves quickly. It has been a challenge to us because normally a lot of our packing of our food packaging and sorting of food collections are all group activities. We couldn't do that anymore. So everything had to be rethought, and we have now a very linear function. So we'll have one volunteer come in and pack a couple of dozen bags. They go home. We set up, and then another volunteer comes in, packs a couple of, dozen bags. So it's a longer timeline, but it's getting done. And what we're noticing is we're getting a lot of new people. Even with masks on, and our patrons come driving with masks as well. I can still recognize them, and I certainly recognize their voices. So we definitely have our regulars, but we do have a lot of new people. And they are younger, they are newly unemployed. And I would say a very large percentage of them are from Soma. And between South Orange and Maplewood, many more actually are from Maplewood. So I do get a chance to ask them what town they're from before they leave. So we have some statistics on that. And, you can kind of tell who the first timers are. They're a little bit more awkward, and they do ask some questions. And I do get a lot of phone calls about the pantry and how to come there. And some people can't wait until a Saturday. So what we've also done is we formed a driving squad of volunteers. So for people who can't wait because they've run out of food until a Saturday, or they're quarantined at home, or for whatever reason, it's not safe for them to come out, we do home delivery. And we never did much of that before because we really didn't need to, but now we do a lot of it. And what's interesting about this is that we're teaming up with the home delivery with a lot of other hunger relief organizations in the community. So if there's, it's hard to say a silver lining in all of this, I think it's pulled our local hunger relief organizations closer together. So I get calls from 2 towns for all ages because there's a senior in need, and maybe I give Kathy Rowe the bag, or she gives me the address, or Cougar Care sends drivers on Saturdays. We do a ton with the Parenting Center. For those of you who are not familiar with the Parenting Center, this is a wonderful element of the school district. It's basically the umbrella organization for the social workers that are in the schools. And they have relationships with a lot of the families of students in need. And they have been delivering food to these families, and that food is collected and organized at Our Lady of Sorrows. So we've actually got a joint venture going with Karen Weiland and her team, and it's really been great because it's opened our eyes to the very local need. Rent Party has always been very supportive financially, and they're gearing up for their garden, so we're happy about that. And Mend is always there for us. There are times when I just don't have enough food, but I can, through Mend and through the food bank, the community food bank in Hillside, we find ways to resource it. So things have changed a lot, but in some ways, we're a lot more aware of each other's needs, and I think that's one plus. So how can we help? How can you help? It's frustrating because people want to volunteer and I can't have group activities. The food donations are always, always welcome. Before the pandemic, I used to say, I'll just take if you're torn between cash or a food donation, I'll take the cash because it gives me ultimate flexibility, and I'll buy food when I want to buy food. But since I can't buy food when I want to buy food, the food donations are really ideal. I have a standard list that for our inventory. It's up there on the screen. I have a cheat sheet that I can share, or maybe will be shared after this. There's a daily drop off, so people don't have to wait till a certain day or a certain time. But we'll take food every day, and what happens is it gets dropped off at the rectory, and the custodians for OLS bring it down to the food pantry, and then we sort it from there. So it's a really good system. Monetary donations, of course, are always welcome because we always buy fresh milk for our patrons on Saturdays. And but the number one thing is if you could spread the word. We have no advertising budget, like I said, and there are so many people out there who are newly in need. So if you can share with them that there is this pantry out there and it's really simple and you don't have to show any special documents, you could just swing by on Saturday morning, the second and fourth Saturday morning of every month from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. No questions asked. We'll be happy to provide a package. That's all.
Thank you so much, Kate. And I'm going to dispense with social commentary so that we can get right into the next speaker, so we'll have as much time as possible in our groups. But I do want to say, if you've not already chatted in your question for Kate, now would be a good time to do that, and want to reassure you that the cheat sheet that she mentioned of what they need will be provided to you as part of the follow-up that we do to this presentation. Now we're moving into our last speaker for tonight, which is Dr. Ronald Taylor. And Dr. Ronald Taylor started his career as a kindergarten teacher, then advanced to positions of assistant principal, as well as an award-winning principal before moving to a regional superintendent role in Newark, New Jersey. He joined Willingboro as superintendent 8 years ago, where his research-based, data-driven approach resulted in bringing academic and operational stability to that district. Dr. Taylor's experience at Willingboro provided a foundation to address many related priorities in our South Orange Maplewood School District, including infrastructure, schools reconfiguration, preschool expansion, student performance monitoring, district operational processes, and last but certainly not least, equity. Of particular relevance to our discussion this evening, he successfully implemented a student Chromebook one-to-one initiative in grades 3 through 12. Now we'll hear more from Dr. Taylor.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me? So happy to join you. Thank you to CCR for giving us this opportunity to join virtually. Thank you to Audrey, Nancy, and Tegan for your guidance. And also want to recognize, I have a few board members joining us, Board of Education members, Board Member Cuddle, Board Member Siders, Board Member Elizabeth Baker, and our student representative, Foreman, has also joined us. So I'm going to try to scroll here. All right. So this evening, I'm of course humbled to join such an esteemed panel, and I will be brief, but hopefully share some information that you find very interesting. I want to, as our previous presenter acknowledged, our Parent Center for the fantastic partnership that we've used to address some of our families who are also food insecure. Trying to scroll here, let's see. There we go. So just a brief overview. We will briefly review the demographics of those who responded to our family digital needs assessment surveys. This will include internet connectivity, as well as the devices that are needed to participate in a distance learning methodology. So just a little bit of background, and we all know that we are experiencing the COVID-19 crisis, but in compliance with the governor's executive order, South Orange Maplewood School District had to shift to a distance learning methodology. Our administration's concerns immediately turned to our commitment to access and equity, specifically to the concerns of students and families who are most vulnerable in our community. And so what did our access and equity concerns include? We just spoke about food security or food insecurity, not just for families who are free and reduced lunch designated, but also for those who have suffered a dramatic loss in their income recently, or those who may have experienced a traumatic loss in their homes or an illness. We also wanted to know, how can we make sure that our students can participate in a distance learning methodology when they may have a lack of internet connectivity, or they may also not have a device or enough devices in their home to participate regularly. We also want to make sure as a district that we are living our creed, that we are applying our access and equity and commitment to restorative practices to our educators as well. We know that our teachers and our principals and administrators, our guidance counselors and social workers are also people too who are living and experiencing this crisis. How do we demonstrate empathy while also striving toward consistency of our offerings? Lastly, and most importantly, how do we keep our staff, our students, and our community safe and healthy during these challenging times? Sorry for the delay here, my clickers. So the digital divide. For purposes of this event, we will focus on the digital divide, which is
Dr. Taylor, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me? Did I lose you? Yes.
We have no audio. If you could wait just one moment to see if we can correct it.
Okay.
Oh, we could hear. We could hear him. We could hear him.
You can hear?
Yeah, we can hear him. Dr. Taylor.
We can hear him too.
Okay.
I can hear him also.
That was a test.
All right. So how do we define digital
Thank you.
divide?
I'm getting confirmation that many people can hear you.
Thank you. So formally, a digital divide it describes the gulf between those who have ready access to computers and internet and those who do not. We as a district, we are aware that there's a digital divide within the universe of our families that we serve, and it's based on socioeconomic status, among other mitigating factors. As a district, we did not yet have a one-to-one standard device methodology. Our schools, of course, have computers, they have Chromebooks, they have Chromebook carts in labs, but these setups, in many cases, they're a daily checkout that's triggered by a request from a teacher or some type of predetermined rotating schedule. These machines were not designed or designated to be issued to students and families. So, of course, what does one-to-one mean? It's a term that we use very often in education. One-to-one refers to the practice in many educational settings, such as schools, that allows students to use an electronic device that belongs to the school district to access digital content. One-to-one devices can include laptops, tablets, and of course, Chromebooks. Students are usually in a one-to-one methodology assigned a particular device, and they are also allowed in many cases to take devices home. So just to be brief, but also hopefully clear, what did we do to address our digital divide in our district? We were first directed by the state of New Jersey, as every school district in New Jersey was, to prepare for a 2-week closure. So we made hard copies of the 2-week plans for every single grade level and every single course that was available to our students, that was available also online. We issued these hard copies to our families who did not have devices or connectivity. Simultaneously, we created multiple telephone surveys. And again, this is very important to have telephone surveys because not everyone has a computer or connectivity to respond to a digital survey. We wanted to find out how many of our families needed devices or connectivity. Once it was very apparent that our closure would be far longer than 2 weeks, our techs and our school-based staffs, our teachers, our principals, our guidance counselors, even front office staff worked together to disassemble our Chrome carts. If you can imagine a Chrome cart, it's all the wires are tangled, all the plugs are tangled. It's just not designed to be checked out as a singular device. So we had to go into the schools and disassemble those carts and also disinfect each of those Chromebooks. We then created a school-based dissemination schedule for these devices from the information that we received from our surveys. We then partnered with Achieve, a wonderful partnering foundation. I did see, I think, Ms. Neary on here. So hello, Ms. Neary, and thank you for your partnership. We partnered with Achieve and our Parent Center to purchase hotspots for parents who are in need of connectivity. Before I go into our survey results, one challenge with our hotspots, as you can imagine, during this time, many of the hotspot providers are on back order with their devices. So we went to their source, which in this case was Verizon. And Verizon offered us a very unique solution to this challenge. We were able to purchase from Verizon cell phones that only had hotspot connectivity turned on for them. And so that way families could utilize those cell phones to connect to the internet. I know this is small, we'll go to a clearer page. So here are the demographics. At the time of this presentation, when it was created, we were able to give devices to 847 families. And here are the demographics of those families. Again, I won't insult you by reading to you, but that's a breakdown of the racial demographics of those at the time who received Chromebooks through this initiative. Right now, we're well over 900. So almost weekly, we're getting more requests from families for devices. Now, what about connectivity? This survey broke down the demographics of those families who requested internet connectivity. And again, a summary of this information. Who does and does not have internet at home? Who needs internet in order to participate in distance learning? We had 81 families who responded. And again, we're still receiving more requests. Here's a breakdown of the demographics of those who requested connectivity via hotspots. So just a few closing thoughts. We are continuing to receive individual requests for devices from families, and we are responding in kind with weekly distributions. As you can imagine, we're of course staying safe. We're keeping social distance. We're also making sure that our families know that this opportunity is still available to them. Some very exciting news. Recently, our Board of Education approved a significant investment to increase the number of devices in our district. We are, of course, already have a device replacement master plan, but the board approved us expediting this plan to the tune of $500,000, which will result in us adding 2,500 Chromebooks to our district. So we're very excited about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Taylor. And as we think about the digital divide, I want to assure you that some of the information that might not have been easily read from the screen, we will follow up with Dr. Taylor and we'll see if we can make that detail available to you in our follow-up. Regarding the digital divide, we're aware that not only our students, but we have residents who are older who many times don't have access to information because they don't have the device or they don't have the connectivity. So the coalition has put together a COVID-19 resource guide. Hopefully you've seen it around town. We specifically have targeted to give to seniors. We're also giving it out to the pantries, food pantries that Kate mentioned earlier. And through the school district, we're giving it out to those students who are still receiving their lunches. And we are in the process of having a Spanish edition printed, and we are looking for translators for Haitian Creole. So if you know someone who can provide the Haitian Creole service, we would love to work with them to get this information translated there as well.
We could be able to help with that as well, Audrey. We can probably help with that. Yes, and for each of those slides that was a little bit distorted because of the design, the following slide had a breakdown of the information.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So now I believe if you're finishing up your chat, your questions for Dr. Taylor, we're ready to have a little bit of background on what we do next. And this is the part, quite frankly, where from my standpoint, all the magic happens. This is where we get a chance to talk to one another, to share our ideas, to refine some theories, and come up with some solutions that we think as a community and as individuals we actually can implement. Each person has been pre-assigned to a breakout room, and believe me, that was no small task. Each group will have a moderator. They'll introduce themselves to you within your group. And then we ask when you're in the group that you at that time, if you have not previously, please turn on your camera. Because at the end of the day, this is about community, about building community, and we want to be able to get comfortable with one another and see one another. In your groups, we will have a warning when the group will then dissolve and become part of the larger group again. And there will be a warning that comes across all of your screens, so it won't be so jolting and abrupt. And once you return to the group format, then your moderator, the person in the group who's helped to keep the conversation rolling, will share some of the highlights that you guys have discussed. We want to say that, as usual, these are safe environments. There will be no camera on during your group discussion, and no one will be able to see any of the chats except those people within your group. A few more guidelines for your group. Tegan? We have ground rules that we always put forth so that we're all working with the same expectation. We ask that in this environment, you will be called upon to give your point of view, but you always have the option to pass. There's no harm in that. And then at the end of the go-around, if you think of something you'd like to share, we welcome that. We ask that everyone listen to one another respectfully. And if someone says something that you find exciting, try to hold your comment until after they have actually completed their contribution. When you speak in these groups, speak for yourself, not anything that you've heard or that's third party, so that if someone has a question or wants to react to that, you're physically in the room to be able to respond. Respond candidly, but respectfully. So speak honestly about what's on your mind, but we always want to treat each other with respect. There's privacy in the room, so whatever you state in the room stays in the room. We ask everyone to please observe that. And sometimes we're not going to have the same point of view, so let's agree to disagree. And lastly, we ask that in the to support privacy, that you don't take any screenshots of any of the information or the chat information, so that everyone's privacy is protected. Moving on to the next slide, before you go into your rooms, we'd like to say that we're going to have your moderator, first of all, find out what you as a group find to be your priorities. And each group may be different because we have different experiences. Some of us have kids, some of us don't, etc. And when you have decided your concentration area, then we're going to ask you to consider these 4 questions. We're going to ask you about what your thoughts are on possible changes at multiple levels, whether it's in our institutions, in public policy, within the community organizations here in SOMA, or in your own personal behavior. Once again, this is not a race exercise, so we want you to have substantive conversation. So, you know, if you don't get to all 4 areas, it's okay. The main thing is for us to be able to share our thoughts and our ideas and hopefully be expanded and, more importantly, committed, because these are coming from us and not being forced upon us by some external force. So that being said, I believe, Tegan, that we are now ready to go into the breakout groups. That is going to happen instantaneously. When you're in your room, you'll be able to see those people who've been assigned to your room.
So I turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Welcome back, everyone. We hope that you had a great conversation. Recognizing that time is short, we're going to just hop right to it. This is the time where the larger group gets to share in what you discuss in your small groups. So I'm going to just call the rooms by the facilitator in that room and ask if that person will share on your behalf. Let's start actually first with Barbara Velasquez's group. I believe that was breakout number 6. Let me be clear. So what you're actually doing is you're sharing highlights from your group up to no longer than 2 minutes. And if you mention something, if you come after someone who has the same idea, please just reference that you also had that idea and only mention it if you have a twist, something unique about it that you think would be helpful. So that being said, I'm sorry, Barbara, let me give the mic back to you. Turn your mic on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we had kind of a freewheeling conversation, but a number of different ideas that fall into the various categories of institutions, public policy, community organizations, and individuals. So, for instance, from the institutional level, particularly the school system, that some standardization of the types of we chose the digital divide.
Okay.
Okay, so the standardization of some of the platforms that are being used to instruct the students, so that there's, you know, some teachers are doing this and some teachers are doing that. And there's a feeling among some of the parents that, you know, they wish that the teacher would be able to be more engaging with the students, so that, you know, at some point to come together and try to pick one platform where there could be like a teacher and then the students, because then there's no one monitoring what the students are doing if the parents happen to be working, for instance, and parents themselves are stressed out because they're not teachers and they're trying to work from home or whatever the case may be.
Okay.
then we also talked about on an individual level, they could be volunteers who are tech savvy, who can help to, can work with the institutions to help correct and teach, maybe teach kids how to, and parents how to actually use the computer, because if they didn't have it before, now they have, now they're like, okay, how do I use this? And then we also talked, Dr. Pritchard mentioned from Seton Hall the possibility of virtual volunteers. There's a MLK scholar community that could possibly volunteer as mentors or tutors on a virtual level. What's the other one? And for the community as a whole, various community organizations as a whole, to come together and resolve some of the issues and concerns that some of the parents have about the various platforms and how if the children are learning enough, and it's their consistency among what the kids are learning at that level.
Thank you. Thank you. Sounds like you guys got a lot done in the time you had. Let me move now to Aaron Schwerser in group number 1. Can you tell us what area you guys selected and some highlights?
So Audrey, don't be mad. We broke the rules.
That's typical.
That's typical. We had an amazing group, including 2 Board of Ed members, a reporter from TAP and NSOMA, and 3 trustees. So none of us followed the rules because we felt all of these issues are so intertwined, we could not break them apart. So what we focused on was a concept of mindset and how we can shift the mindset of a community to actually address some of the issues that are happening. So being more transparent about the need gap, being calling out when the stigmas that may be associated with accessing resources, because that's a big, we live in the burbs, it's keeping up with the Joneses, right? One big movement was out of the Maplewood Pool Committee. They actually noticed that the office where you got your pool assistants to join the pool at a discount, it was called the welfare office, like we're back in the 60s or something. And so just even reframing the name of that office, although the function's the same, but reframing the name, it reduces that stigma so people are able to access the resource. Just trying to get more information out there. We also wanted to look a little further down the road of other areas that intersect here. So Abby, I'm gonna give you a shout out here, pointed out that we need to look ahead in terms of having community medical clinics, because health insurance, related to employers will start to dry out. It's harder to get state resources. And so basic things such as basic wellness checks, vaccinations are still gonna happen and can become barriers for people to access. So just getting more and more information out there and having us be ambassadors of the resources that are there and destigmatizing as much as we can.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. Let's move to Kelly Cork's group, which was breakout number 5.
Great. I will summarize really quickly. We also did not follow the rules and talked about many topics. I invoke board chair privilege to do that. So when it came to food insecurity, our main feeling was this: the community really does address this well, but we wish there was a coordination, and Kate may know more about this, amongst all the organizations. So we have the Mend Food Pantries, but we also have Backpack Pals, and we have Cougar Cares, and we have other small ways that people are distributing food, or the schools are giving out meals. And how we can pull all of that knowledge together so that we can more accurately assess the need from the community as a whole. We're seeing it double the need at OLS. Is it also doubling in all these other places? Is it tripling in some places? So we can make sure if someone's not getting to Seth Boyden for a meal, but they could get it somewhere that's more geographically convenient to them, we can address those needs. We talked a little bit about the need for perhaps a community fund that is just the fairy godparent fund that could help people who needed something, whether that's food assistance or rent assistance, or I need assistance with my utilities so that I can stay in the community and during times of challenge. And then the last part, we felt we needed the school district, we really need a policy so that we make sure while we're in this digital learning environment in particular, that we're not shortchanging any kid. And so we're making sure that kids who have IEPs are getting tailored and are getting their needs met. We make sure that everyone can get their needs met, and we know that's not necessarily a cookie cutter answer or one size fits all, and how we really can get that done so that every child has the same opportunity to thrive.
Excellent. I think you met the charge.
All right, I'm done.
Let's move on to group 2, Nancy Gagne.
Okay, we also discussed all the issues for the same reason that Erin's group did, but we discussed them slightly differently. We definitely focused on the fact that these insecurities that were discussed by the panelists were there before COVID, and that they intersect, and we need to recognize that. We need to communicate it to the community, especially to those who have privilege and may fail to recognize repeatedly that just because you have one insecurity and I give you food, that you're not now suffering the lack of technology in your home or job insecurity or any of those other things that have descended upon people. We need to communicate the intersection of these issues. And I heard the phrase, which I like, advocating for change and not relying on charity. We're in the charity mode because we have to be, but if we are looking to the future and we're challenging our leaders and our institutions to think about these insecurities that existed before, we shouldn't be in this place again. Our children should not be without the technology that they need. Some specific suggestions that came up were taking our Title I counts seriously and figuring out how to use that money best. Being serious about supporting social services for children in the schools. There was a question, this was a question that we felt that wasn't addressed, how we serve people with disabilities and students who have special needs. And I think that pretty much covers it.
Great. Thank you, Nancy. Let's move to Judith Gaston in breakout room number 3.
Yes. Well, group number 3 had a lot of questions pertaining to the digital divide. There were questions that had to do with the younger children and how they could possibly be navigating this distance learning, especially if they have older parents or grandparents, I should say, that may not be able to always assist them. Mm-hmm. There was a question about structure and how at this stage, many students may have been so very used to having structure in school, and that at this point they may be procrastinating because, again, there isn't the constant guidance that teachers have provided. There were also questions that had to do with whether or not the Chromebooks that were provided were equipped with enough filters so that children do not get tempted to go to inappropriate sites. So someone did answer the question, someone who knew, did say that there were no reasons to be concerned. It seems as if, the computers came equipped to prevent this type of problem. I think basically that is what was said.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And our last readout comes from group number 4, Liz Testa.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So our group was Marcia and Leslie and Salima and Abdulalim and Kristen and Shannon and myself. And we had great discussion around food and around schools. So it was a little beyond just digital divide, but it still did talk about that. I would say that we were looking at things in a holistic manner and trying to draw the circle wider. These are some of the themes that already have come up, but just to put it into the language of our group, around a concern for all. So we mentioned for all children, children with special needs being one such group. We talked about food insecurity, and for those who perhaps previously had not struggled, but now are now starting to more and more. So they need extra help getting connection with the resources because it's a new situation for them. We also talked about specifically undocumented immigrants and those who are fearful for that ICE will come after them, you know, those matters that pertain to them. So those are a few of those marginalized communities. So how do we expand our territory and build grace and empathy for the whole community? And what was said earlier about the keeping up with the Joneses, that exact term was brought up in our group as well. And so how do we, again, I would say my own language, but to move away from the American construct of individualism and really lean into some of our cultures of origin or global cultures around a communal mindset around, you know, care for all. And so pertaining to food, we did talk about that there really are a lot of, from the sort of bigger picture to smaller individual organizations, there really is a lot of food resourcing going on. And so knowing that, and several people in our group were able to actually speak into that specifically, it's really quite comprehensive. So then what the issue is then how do we get that information? How do we create barrier-free access to those groups? So that was, and Audrey, you and your posters, sign hanging were named as one of the ways that we're looking to do that. So how do we stay on top of that? How do we create those pathways for access of information? And then also one thing that was very interesting around the school thing was really a little forward thinking. Once we go back in the fall, how do we measure student success? How do we measure that students are where they're supposed to be at? How do we help them to catch up? And I know the schools are looking to do that. So Dr. Taylor in particular will be really eager to hear how you all are doing that, how we as a community can support you and your team as you're figuring out how do we do that in ways that are equitable for all children.
Thank you, Liz. It's pretty amazing what you guys were able to accomplish in just 30 minutes, and in some cases less because of our technical issues. So kudos to the group, and I hope that the thinking we've begun will continue and result in some action, because that's what we're really focusing on, how we take these concepts and make them a reality. Looking at the time now, I'm going to hope that I see we have 37 people who are still with us. Thank you for hanging in there. 37 of the 47 who signed on at some point or another. We're at the point now where we're going to take the questions, direct questions to our speakers. We want to assure you that our presenters have been gracious enough to say that there's no way we're going to get through all the questions tonight. However, every question that was submitted will be answered. So we will put the responses onto our website so that everyone has access to that information. The other beauty of this technology is that this whole session has been recorded, so everyone participating will get a link to what we have done tonight, and that link will also be printed, posted on our website. That being said, let me go to Tegan and to our presenters, and let's see if we can get at least one question from each of them and see how much time we have left. Tegan?
Sure. Let's start with Dean. I think what I've done is I thank you all for bringing your questions into the chat. I've given them to the presenters directly, and they have chosen which one they think they have the time to answer now. So Dean, go ahead.
Okay, I can cover them all very quickly. Here we go. Renters, we encourage you to make arrangements with your landlord, and there is assistance out there for you to do so if you cannot on your own. Please do so. This is not a rent holiday. Homeowners, only seek mortgage relief if you need it, okay? Even though it comes with no negative credit issues right now, paying a sum later is tantamount to having new debt, and that could be dangerous as well. The mortgage relief that we've talked about tonight under all the different executive orders pertains only to residential properties. However, we have heard and we know that commercial tenants and commercial landlords are reaching similar arrangements. So if you're a commercial landlord, you're not getting rent from your merchant, use their security deposit and reach your lender for mortgage relief. How many evictions are we talking about? Well, the Eviction Lab of Princeton University estimates that there's an eviction in this country filed every 4 minutes. That's right, every 4 minutes. In Essex County alone last year, there were over 40,000 40,000 evictions filed. In New Jersey, there 1/3 of residents are apartment tenants. We have, as per latest numbers of the New Jersey Apartment Association, over 3 million apartment units in the state. Where are the homeless? They are everywhere. Homelessness doesn't have boundaries. What are we doing in terms of planning? What mitigation are we focusing on at DCA to deal with the situation when we come out of this? Rental assistance, rental assistance, rental assistance. We are trying to get it out there right now to folks who need it. It goes directly to landlords, right, to help tenants out. And we are expanding our existing programs and becoming issuing waivers of existing regulations so that we can help more people. So we can help you even if you're not officially being evicted. We can help you even if you're undocumented. These were some of the things that were precluding us from being able to help more people. And where's the money coming from? The money's coming from CARES and additional funding from the federal government. And state funds. There was a couple of bills that passed the state legislature earlier last week that made some of these appropriations, and we look forward to putting them into place. I got to everything.
Dean, thank you so much. That was phenomenal. I'm very impressed. I don't want to put our other two speakers under that kind of pressure. You can answer just a single question and have more time to answer other things in writing. But right now I'll turn it over to Kate and I'll leave it up to you how you decide to respond.
Okay. Well, thanks, Tegan. So yeah, that's a tall order to follow, but I would just like to say a couple of things that might generally answer the questions. There was a comment, I think it was Kelly, who recognized the need for coordination across hunger relief resources. And I think that's a very perceptive, and I think that's something that we can move forward with. And I think this pandemic may pull us together. I think nonprofits have a tendency to sometimes silo out and focus on their individual mission, but I think we can be more effective together. And I think that's how we're going to get through this. And we're starting to do more and more of this, but I think if we have encouragement from the community and an incentive in that way, that will only further the best results. There was another question, I think it was Aaron, who talked about community medical clinics. Now, a couple of times at our pantry, we've had the Summit Medical Group Foundation come in and provide clinics. We're not the only men pantry who has done that. There's a real need for that. I mean, we actually had people who, upon getting tested, had to be taken to the emergency room. And so there are a lot of people who aren't able to fully take care of their health. And I'd like to add, in addition to medical issues, really the first thing that goes is dental issues. So if there is any way to get dental services to the community in need, that would be also very valuable. We do not get free, let me just answer, do grocery stores give us free food? No, they do not. We have to buy the food, regardless of whether it's ready to expire or not. The community food bank does get free food because they have trucks that can come in and do that work for the grocery stores, and then we need to buy that food from the community food bank. We do take gift cards. And that's wonderful. We take store cards, we take Visa cards, we take cash checks, and there's a site on the OLS church ministry to dedicate funds to the food pantry. So there's lots of ways of supporting us in addition to food. And that's about all I think I should cover right now.
Thanks so much, Kate. Well done in a short period of time. And just as a reminder, we'll be sending out the cheat sheet for OLS that talks about key ways that you can support the pantry as well. Everyone will get that as a follow-up. And now, Dr. Taylor.
So I'm the only thing standing between you and dinner for some of us, I know. How much time can I take, Tegan? Just want to be respectful of everyone's time. I have a lot to share, but I don't want to violate the protocols.
if I may step in, I know you have so much to share, and so as not to cut the shortchange your responses, I would suggest that we follow up on your gracious offer to provide responses in writing, and just pick maybe 2 items that you in particular think are of most interest to our residents here today.
Okay, well, from my listening just now, it sounds like everyone broke the rules. So I think I'm going to try to break the rules just a little bit. The question, one question from the chat asked about the data point and how many kids have been impacted, and that is a crucial question because we only know who responded to the survey, right? And so, depending on your circumstances, some of our most vulnerable children and families, their phone numbers change all the time. Their emails change all the time.
Right.
So while I can confirm that we've given out over 900 Chromebooks, it doesn't mean that there aren't 500 more families who need assistance. And what we've also seen is that some families who did not need assistance in the beginning of this need assistance now. Right? They had 3 kids and a mom and a dad, or a mom and a mom, or a dad and a dad, and they're living a great life, and they have three computers at home, but now they need 5 computers in order to be successful. And so we understand that. There's also a question of the percentage. So if we go with who has responded, 900 or so parents, out of about 7,200 students overall, understanding that there's some crossover where multiple families multiple children may live with the same family, et cetera. That's probably a 1 to 7 ratio. Less than 20%, but probably, it comes very close to our free and reduced lunch percentage, which is about 15 to 12% in that range as well. So it almost complies directly to that as a, let's see, the next question here, is someone reaching out to teachers to help them with virtual learning? If they still need, can we support them? They definitely still need it. This was an emergent situation. We only had a couple of days to give professional development to teachers. And as you know, we differentiate for kids. We also have to differentiate for our educators. They bring different levels of experience, different levels of expertise. And so we have a communication going out tomorrow as part of our weekly newsletter. And in it, we're detailing some of that agreement to give support to our teachers between now and the beginning of our school year next year, because we don't know what we're going to expect. It could be a brick and mortar traditional. It could also be virtual. It could also be a hybrid where kids are not going to school every day. And so we're going to really be focusing our professional development on our teachers and making sure that they're comfortable. And just to go down a couple of the comments from the groups, there was a question about platforms. We have multiple platforms that teachers are using. Why aren't teachers all using the same platforms? Part of what we found in this research is that not every platform matches every age group. It's not appropriate for every age group. So we've given teachers a variety of platforms that they can utilize. And we've also given them some direct tutelage on those platforms. There was a question about, I think, parents feeling overwhelmed. And we've tried to be, very clear that we want parents and families to do what you can, right? We don't want to add to the trauma, the stress that you are dealing with when students come back to school, whether it's virtually or brick and mortar. We have assessments in place that'll help us to see where students are, and we can meet them where they are without being punitive during this time of crisis. One great piece that I think was mentioned multiple times was the need for parent professional development, that some parents, they need some help in learning how to utilize these platforms. And I think that the idea of virtual tutors to be able to help with the technical aspect is awesome. One example, on the day that we were giving out our Chromebooks, the first day, we had one parent who had just moved to the community and just came into the country that day.
Wow.
And they were getting issued a Chromebook. They were using their telephones to video how to get into Google Classroom as we showed them on the spot. So this is a truly emergent situation. And I'll just be quick. And as far as meals go, the first 2 days that we served meals, we were in single digits with our meal service, about 7 families per day. Today we served 272. And so not only is it growing, it's exploding. And we're taking this very seriously. And we, of course, don't want anyone to be stigmatized. Unlike most school districts, we're able to still serve hot food. And so we're able, with the governor's executive order, to serve not only students who attend our schools, but any students who live in the general vicinity. And we've been sharing that very, very widely. Last but not least, I see Joel Herbert down there. Mr. Herbert, during my very first day in district at the meet and greet, he asked a question about Chromebooks and about our ability to be able to fix them and how current they were. And less than a year, you can see that we're almost exclusively focusing on them. So it shows you how quickly our world changes. And so again, tomorrow, as we do every Friday, we send out a newsletter update. And tomorrow's newsletter is going to have a lot of information around our current circumstances. And so if you don't normally get our newsletters, we send them out to all of our families. We share them with our township leaders. And if you would like, I can send it to CCR as well, and you can send them out to your contacts. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for sticking with us. We only have a few more minutes left. In those few minutes, first I'd like to give the last word to our chair, Kelly Quirk, who will close us out, and to please ask you to stay and give us just a few minutes of feedback. There's a poll at the end of our session. The beauty of this technology, as I said, is we will be providing you with a link. We'll also be providing to the recording. We'll be providing you with the PDFs of the handouts. And we'll also provide, I think we'll be able to provide comments and responses in the public chat as well. So I'm going to hand it over to Kelly now.
Thanks, Audrey. First of all, I want to thank all the participants who came on this Zoom call and took time out of your lives to participate in this important conversation and to help us learn how to have, as an organization, we believe very strongly at the Coalition on fostering face-to-face dialogue through difficult subjects and helping people have respectful conversations even when they're challenging. And this is our first time doing this virtually. And so I want to thank you all for, in many ways, being our test case and for the feedback, honest feedback you'll give us about whether this format worked for you and what we can tweak. I want to thank our presenters, Dean Daffis, Kate Cahill, Dr. Taylor, for talking with us so clearly about the inequities that we see in our community that are exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. And then also for us all to always remember that those inequities to access to resources that are currently being stressed by the pandemic have always disproportionately affected our Black and Brown residents and will, as a result of the epidemic and the pandemic, continue to disproportionately affect our Black and Brown residents. We don't want to lose sight of that in our moving forward towards equity. And then I'm struck by the incredible community need we're seeing right now that I only think will get worse. I'm also struck by the incredible community commitment that I've heard from every one of these groups and these dialogue groups over the phone. And the various ways we as individuals can work, but also that collectively we can work together to support our friends and neighbors during this time. And finally, I'll thank our program director at the South Orange Maplewood Community Coalition on Race, Audrey Rowe. I'll thank Tegan Cullen and everybody. We have a number of trustees, too many to name, I'm sorry, on this call, but we're over time, and so I want to make sure we get you to do the poll. But again, thank you so much for the time that you have all given. For Kate, Dr. Taylor, Dean, just in particular, the time you also spent answering our questions. You could have answered one question and been like, I'll write you later, but you all took the time to kind of answer a lot of our questions, and I do want to sincerely appreciate that. And then just so you know, we can save the chat function, so we can go back and look at some of these questions as an organization and wrestle with them as a board, and I appreciate all the candid feedback we got through that.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you so much, Kelly. And before you go down to the center of your screen and click on poll, I also want to give a shout out to the Coffee House Discussion Committee, which included Kubi Darsalan, Judith Gaston, Niev Minnesota, and Barbara Velasquez. They all work behind the scenes to really make this happen, and so grateful for their work and grateful for each and every one of you. So before you leave us, please go down to the center of your screen, complete your poll, and we will be getting back to you via the email that you used to register with the follow-up materials. And I see that Tegan's actually put the poll questions up on your screen. So, actually we can see responses as they come in. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, everyone. For those of you who have attended our events before, you'll see that we have less ability in this format to get your qualitative feedback. So please do feel free to email us at the Coalition if there are topics you'd like us to cover in the future, if you have comments on the way that things went tonight, if this was a good format for you or not. And again, thank you so much for your attention, your attendance, your engagement. We're always so fortunate to be part of such an engaged community. Thank you.